Hey folks, just wanted to update you on some changes that will be happening here at the Star Wars podcast. As of January 1st, all of our bonus episodes, those being our review and interview episodes, are going to be Patreon exclusive content. So if you want unlimited access to that bonus content, make sure you head over to www.patreon.com/StarLores and become a patron for a minimum of $2 per month. And we will set you up with a private RSS feed after you sign up. However, for all you freeloaders out there, we will still be releasing bonus content, but it will only be available for free for 1 month, at which point it goes behind a paywall. Okay. Next on the agenda. Do you need to get a Christmas present this year, but you don't want to brave the malls or deal with COVID? Well, have I got the thing for you. Amazon is selling a Baby Yoda push toy, and you can get 15% off if you buy it through the affiliate link in the description of this episode. Christmas is coming soon, and it's a great gift for one of your kids or loved ones. And also, don't forget to give us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes, as well as share the show with your fellow Star Wars geeks. I would like to remind everyone as well that we are on YouTube if that is your preferred platform, so give us a like and sub on there as well. And we'd also love to hear from you on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. Just search the Star Wars podcast and give us feedback, corrections, compliments, or cool Star Wars factoids. We love to hear from you, so reach out to us there. And finally, we are totally taking submissions of any Star Wars related art, fiction, collections, or music. Just send us a DM and we'll give you a feature on social media. All right, let's get into the show.
You are listening to the Star Wars podcast. I find your lack of faith disturbing.
Are you stuck-up, half-witted, scruffy-looking nerve herder?
But I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
Welcome aboard the Millennial Falcon. We're in wild space tonight on Halloween. There's no Jedi Padawans asking us for candy because we're in the middle of space. Yeah, we're just trick-or-treating for, spice and things like that. Kyber crystals, that kind of thing. Yeah, so today we are reviewing Devilworlds 1 and 2. The Devilworlds comics are just sort of collections of various weekly comics that Alan Moore was sort of the principal writer on for Marvel's UK division. So these were originally only published in the UK, and they were published as weeklies as well. So weekly comics is obviously, the storytelling constraints are quite a bit different. Yeah, I'm just going to point that right there. There we go. Right. Oh, your mic's not tight enough. Over there. Huh? Yeah. There we go. That's good. Oh, right. Yeah. Sorry about that. Go ahead. Yeah. So he was a staff writer. Alan Moore was a staff writer for Marvel UK at the time. And guessing it was just work. And they're like, we need these weekly comics pumped out. That's kind of early in his career. I mean, he started in the 70s, I believe. Yeah, makes sense. But he didn't really get going till like the 80s, and he wrote some stuff for DC, and then Watchmen obviously was his magnum opus. Was that his breakthrough? That's kind of what made him a household name in terms of comic books. Pretty much it was Watchmen, but he's had like a lot of great. Yeah, he did like some really famous Batman arcs or something, right? Yep. Which we'll get more into the Lovecraftian connections here, but in Batman specifically, Arkham Asylum, that comes directly from Lovecraft's sort of horror universe. There's a town called Arkham
Is there?
Full
Okay.
of crazy people and various demon creatures. I
Yeah.
think there may have even been an Arkham Asylum in a Lovecraft
Okay.
story, which was obviously the same idea.
Right.
A lot of Batman villains have
Yeah.
that sort of dark gothic edge to them, similar to what you find in Lovecraft stories.
Yeah.
And so Alan Moore is he uses a lot of sort of tropes from Lovecraft. We'll get into it a little bit here. So there's that first story in the collection, which is A Dark Lord's Conscience.
Yeah.
So in this one, Darth Vader is playing space chess against a space octopus who's like,
Some kind of crime lord or something like that.
it wasn't super clear
Yeah.
what I think it was like a royal or something on that planet, maybe.
Yeah.
Not a good person in bed with the Empire, right? Not a good sentient, I should say.
Yeah.
It was cool that they didn't make the octopus like run around on land, because that wouldn't really make sense given their biology. They're
Yeah.
obviously sea creatures. They don't have skeletons. It would kind of be hard to get around. And so it was like suspended in this glass bubble that was
Yeah.
full of liquid.
Yeah. Like a real octopus.
Exactly.
Were there some Cthulhu vibes going on there?
Definitely. So that's something that comes up a lot in Lovecraft's work. Is a lot of his horror comes from like, it's this interesting perspective on the sea, I think, that we don't have now because
Yeah.
of the media we consume relating to the sea is never in a scary tone. It's The Little Mermaid and it's David Attenborough on Planet Earth documentaries.
Yes. However, have you seen The Lighthouse?
I haven't.
Okay, you should watch the Lighthouse, because that is a very creepy. It's with Willem Dafoe and what's his name? New Batman.
Christian Bale?
No.
Ben Affleck?
No, the newest one.
I don't know.
He was in Twilight and all that.
Oh, Robert Pattinson?
Yeah, Robert Pattinson. They do. It's just the two of them in the whole film, basically. And it's like all black and white.
Oh, wow.
And it's sort of like a thriller horror, but I have to say, like, Willem Dafoe just like steals the show. He's just like sort of the salty sea dog who mans like a lighthouse. And it was filmed in Nova Scotia.
Oh, cool.
And anyways, it kind of gets into those vibes of like the ocean is actually like a really scary place. It's haunted. People die out there. You're isolated. And just the whole tone of it. So if you want to see some media that more represents that, I would recommend watching The Lighthouse.
Very much so. And so Willem Dafoe basically reprises his character from The Hunter. Have you seen that
I haven't
Willem
seen The
Dafoe
Hunter,
movie?
no.
Also very good.
Okay.
He plays a big game hunter who's going after the last thylacine.
Oh, okay.
Which are Tasmanian tigers, which have been
Yeah.
extinct. But in this movie, there's one left, obviously, that he's hunting. That's a deep tangent.
Yeah.
So what were we talking about? The Green Goblin?
Yeah. Well, in any case, sort of like this Lovecraftian kind of horror genre, which Alan Moore seems to be very inspired by in a lot of his writings.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was talking about the horror of sea creatures in Lovecraft's writing. That comes up a lot. And he grew up in New England as well, which is like a very spooky place. Just sort of the landscape. And it has, these really bitter cold winters and that kind of thing. And then rough seas abound. Yeah. And then, of course, all that lore going back to like the Pilgrims and the Salem witch trials.
Yeah, Salem,
and
Massachusetts and all that. Yeah.
That's the cultural background he grew up in. Mm-hmm. And then also people were just starting to sort of scrape the surface of making discoveries of what was actually living down in the sea.
Yes.
Right. But what they were finding is very weird stuff like octopi and squids and all these kind of things.
I also think, and again, just as an aside too, I also think there is something to, like you said, like in our modern day, we sort of see the ocean as like sandy beaches and
it's pretty and nice and full of life,
sun tanning and stuff, and coral reefs. But probably back in the day, the ocean was a very unforgiving and merciless place where a lot of people died, and was, you know, you had to travel an ocean for weeks to make it to the New World, right?
Practically starving, getting scurvy,
Yeah,
everybody's
exactly.
sick. I've heard tales of like basically on the ships that went from like England to the US, it was just like nonstop diarrhea for like
I bet
8 weeks as you're going across the ocean, eating a piece of hard dry bread a day.
Yeah, so exactly. So the sort of culture around the ocean and the water, I think would be a lot more ominous than kind of what we have today.
And the ominous is like that's Lovecraft's bread and butter. That's what
exactly
he does best.
Hence Alan Moore.
Hence Alan Moore. So in A Dark Lord's Conscience, it's interesting because we get like this character who has some sort of psychic powers. He's described as an empath, which is almost, I see that as sort of Alan Moore's comic book writing chops coming to play, because empath, I feel like, is an ability that lots of mutants and sort of DC type characters have.
Yep.
So we get this empath who then there are a couple of stormtrooper guards outside of this gigantic human chessboard.
Yeah.
There are these stormtroopers, and one of them doesn't have his helmet on, which is an interesting decision to show a stormtrooper, especially this early in sort of Star Wars lore.
Yeah.
And he just sort of has that typical like Vietnam vet kind of military face, like short haircut, but it's growing out a little bit. He's got like some 5 o'clock shadow going, that kind of thing, complaining about the rain. And then this yellow-eyed empath character comes in from the rain all spookily.
Yeah.
And then he sort of, because he's got this telepathic ability, he like dregs up the stormtroopers' memories of like all of the war crimes he's committed. And there's like this sort of terrifying panel of a close-up on his face where he's like just clutching his head and sort of having all this regret and all these feelings and remorse that he didn't feel at the time that this empath is evoking in him.
Yeah. He seems to have this ability, I'm assuming a force ability too.
That's the thing I wondered, is we see a lot of superpowers throughout these, but none of them are really clocked as being the force per se.
Yeah, it seems, but maybe that was like Alan Moore's interpretation of what the force was. That it's more just like the supernatural is kind of what he thought it as.
Yeah, like Alan Moore doesn't need the force. Yeah. He doesn't need plausible deniability.
But again, like I think a lot of these comics were written just after the first, maybe second movie. So like a lot of the deep history and understanding about the force probably wasn't established. So I'm guessing a lot of these writers took more liberties
and actually
their interpretation.
In some of these comics in particular, that were sort of used as the foundation for some later lore that appears in Star Wars.
Yeah, for sure.
So anyway, the empath comes up to Vader after sneaking past the guards. I don't know what happens to them. They just have some sort of post-traumatic stress reaction and have a heart attack and die or something. Yeah. And he tries that trick on Vader. And it just doesn't work.
Yeah. So obviously, I think most people can guess how that went.
Yeah. So Vader presses some button on their giant chessboard and he's engulfed in flames.
Yeah.
But then we find out that the empath was actually sort of sent there by our giant octopus character as like an assassin for Lord Vader. And it's interesting in the sort of back and forth that Vader and the Octopus King have, that Vader doesn't really have this sort of imperious, I don't care about you attitude, just do what I say, that we see in most other Star Wars properties. And this is sort of a theme that I found in a few of the other Marvel Star Wars comics, with Vader not really acting much like Vader, because he's actually being kind of nice and cordial and respectful to this reigning despot or whoever he is. Like he's playing a game with him, right? Can you imagine Darth Vader playing a game? The Darth Vader we see in most cases.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like he's much fun. I think he'd
Probably,
force
yeah.
choke you if you.
It is sort of an interesting scenario to put Vader in. But
Yeah.
anyways.
So he ends up killing the
Yeah.
the octopus. And so then the second comic in the series is a non-canon backstory for the Millennium Falcon. It's called The Flight of the Falcon. This one I don't think Alan Moore wrote. And it's obvious, it sort of seems like that because it's just not that. We don't have any of those Lovecraft allusions or magic or anything like that, or any horror stuff. It's just straight up Han and Lando, I believe, running a con on the Millennium Corporation.
Yeah. This one was actually kind of cool, though.
It was actually an interesting backstory. I thought
Falcon. It's like an origin story for the Millennium Falcon.
And it also explains like why is the Millennium Falcon so fast and so good? Why does Han love it? Everybody thinks it's just this dumpy thing. But.
Yeah. However, I should have checked this, but I feel like that didn't end up being the actual origin story of.
No, it's a non-canon.
Yeah.
And I'll get into some of those discrepancies in a second here. I just want to fact check something real.
Yeah, but
quick.
it's kind of interesting because Han finds out that the Millennium Corporation is making. They already had these ships called what they call them,
the Millennium Hawks.
Yeah, and they're sort of like a pre-Millennium Falcon prototype, and the what do you call them? The Empire is unable to catch them, and they're used to smuggle as smuggling ships. But the Empire is having difficulty catching them. Anyways, long story short, Han figures out about this Millennium Falcon and that the Empire actually might be entering into a contract with this Millennium Corporation to give them the Falcon. And then Han leaks this information to the Republic. And then end of the day, the Republic destroys the Millennium Corporation. I would almost say murders them without a trial.
Yeah, I thought it was a bad look for the rebels.
I thought it was
as well.
a really bad look. I was just like, you don't know how many people were living at these like factories, and probably just like poor workers, right? Like,
and we're clearly meant to believe that they destroyed everything.
Yeah.
This
it was actually
corporation.
like quite ruthless.
Yeah.
Like,
and in order to steal the Falcon, Han wears like this mask, and the mask just reminded me of the mask of Clavicus Vile from the Elder Scrolls games.
oh yeah,
And if you don't know, he's this sort of a demon. He's the demon king of like commerce and trade, basically. So kind of interesting that Han's wearing that. Obviously, this was written before Elder Scrolls, though. And I think
maybe there's some sort of mythological connection to that. I don't know.
it's a fairly simple like metal
Yeah,
outline of a face, though. So it's not that
sure.
out of the realm. So Blind Fury.
Yes.
This is the one that sort of kicked us off on this tangent. I came across this when I was doing research for Darksiders. And then when I looked more into it, I found out that there's this whole Devilworlds series that Alan Moore wrote. So, and this one leans heavily into Lovecraftian themes.
Yeah.
So the first frame, you see Luke, or the first panel rather, he's in some dark place and he's just being beset upon by all manner of horrible, frightening looking ghouls and demons. There's like some ghost wearing a sheet. There's some tentacles in there. There's like a giant crab, lots of glowing eyes, and slime is everywhere. And this is where his writing really comes more to the forefront here than in the other one. So I'll just read some of the text boxes, and then I'm going to compare them with some Lovecraftian text.
Okay.
The floor is slippery with foulness, and he clutches the wall for support. Something wriggles beneath his fingers, screaming with a child's voice. He sees their faces in the cold and crackling glow of his lightsaber, sees the sick, festering hatred in their eyes. Out of the dark, they squirm, they flutter. So that's Alan Moore doing Lovecraft in Space. And now I will read from The Moon Bog out of this beautiful Eldritch Tales. It's a collection of H.P. Lovecraft short stories in a nice black leather, gold embossed cover, which is very much like a tome you'd find underneath the Sith temple on Korriban. So let's see. As I thought of him, new terrors convulsed me, and I fell to the floor, not fainting, but physically helpless. Then I felt the icy blast from the east window where the moon had risen, and began to hear the shrieks in the castle far below me. Soon those shrieks had attained a magnitude and quality which cannot be written of, and which make me faint as I think of them. So that's just sort of that very... You can sort of see the style that Moore is aping, although he doesn't use the Lovecraft sort of trope where it was so scary I can't describe it. That's sort of something that H.P. Lovecraft sort of defaults to quite a bit near the ends of a lot of his stories.
Okay.
So anyway, also in Blind Fury, so what is Luke doing in this one again? He's like going to the bottom of some pyramid. Oh, there's a distress call, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, he's kind of on a mission to discover what this distress call is.
And what he finds is, of course, this labyrinthine maze. It's kind of like something you'd see out of an Indiana Jones movie. It's like a ancient dark temple. And then he finds this ziggurat inside of a large chamber, and so it's like kind of like a stepped Mayan pyramid is what it looks like, but then at the top it's got another pyramid of glass, and then inside that is like the mummified corpse of a sorcerer who is from the Order of the Terrible Glare. His name is Rur. If you listen to our Darksiders episode, you'll remember the Order of the Terrible Glare, which was made into an official part of the Jedi, the Legends canon. And Luke says that in this comic that Ben Kenobi actually told him about the Order and the war that they had with the Jedi.
Right. Like thousands of years ago.
And so this happened because I believe there's an entry in it might be the complete encyclopedia or a role-playing guide.
Okay.
About them. It was in like 12,000 BBY.
Yeah.
Or somewhere around there. Long before even Knights of the Old Republic.
Yeah.
And before like the mainline Sith
Yeah.
had even developed. And when Moore wrote this story, it was also before they'd even fleshed out any of the details of the Sith.
It almost reminded me of like a holocron.
Yeah, absolutely.
The holocron idea where like it's sort of this AI, but it embodies the personality and memories and whatnot of the Sith in which it represents, Jedi.
It's a true like technological version of a ghost or like an evil spirit.
Yeah.
Like literally the ghost in the machine.
Yeah, right.
And so that's what Rur is. Even though we see his mummified body and it appears to be talking, he says that like he's not in the body anymore. He's in this supercomputer that's inside the pyramid.
Right, yeah.
And so to get revenge on the Jedi.
And I was wondering if maybe this was sort of the origins of the holocron idea.
Now that you actually bring that up, because especially Sith holocrons are like always pyramidal.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's like pyramids on Korriban and stuff like that. So I sort of think that they did.
It seems to be inspired.
I imagine other comic book writers sort of look up to Alan Moore. And if any of them had a hand in these, they're like, oh, let's take off Alan's ideas.
But the other interesting thing too was that Rur kind of had no concept of how much time had passed, and he sort of wanted like revenge on all the Jedi who had defeated him. But by the writing of this, Luke was really the only Jedi left because Darth Vader had basically killed them all, right?
And he wasn't even a full Jedi.
Yeah, exactly. He wasn't really a Jedi.
And certainly, although we know now that there are, maybe a dozen Jedi scattered throughout the galaxy, but when this was written, Luke was actually it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
I guess Yoda would have been alive as well.
That's true. Yeah. So, but even Luke, but at the very least, Luke didn't seem to know that. So,
no.
So, yeah, it seemed to be that Luke was like, "Sorry to burst your bubble there, bud, but all the Jedi are dead, and there's none left to kill." And so it's sort of interesting when he no longer has vengeance to satisfy.
Yeah, and this could be another part of hashtag the Empire did nothing wrong, because without batting an eyelash, Luke sort of just breezes over the fact that not only did the Jedi defeat the Order of the Terrible Glare, but they hunted down and exterminated all of them.
Yeah.
So the Jedi really went on an intentional war of extermination against them.
A genocide.
Yeah. Granted, we don't know what exactly the Order of the Terrible Glare was doing.
Yeah.
And
they maybe deserved it.
Yeah. And it does kind of seem like they did, because in further Star Wars tales, we learn about this Pious Day era of the Old Republic,
right,
where the Republic briefly turned into like this very xenophobic, human-run, like holy war organization who was carrying on their own wars of extermination. And
Jonathan in the chat, in the live Instagram chat, also thinks that the Empire did nothing wrong.
Good man.
So anyways,
and then at the very end of the comic, we get a nice sort of comment on the futility of war.
Like in the end of Devil's World or the end of Blind Fury?
At the end of Blind Fury.
Okay, yeah.
So he watches the flames for a long time, thinking of hatred and revenge, of obsession and blindness, that of Rur, that of himself. There's a lesson here somewhere. Perhaps if he stares into the flames for long enough, it will be revealed to him. And then you just sort of get a picture of Luke looking into the flames of the temple, which just blew up, sort of sad and confused.
Yeah.
And it just ends with the word perhaps ...
Yeah. And this is sort of, I mean, if you've read Annie Allen Moore, like this is often how he ends most of his. It's not a real resolution like you might expect in most, like, let's say Disney.
Much like Lovecraft.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Also
if you've read like
bad
The Killing
endings.
Joke or The Watchmen and stuff, like the end is always, it does end, but it kind of feels like your heart's wrenched a little bit when it ends.
They don't necessarily resolve all the problems.
Yeah, exactly.
of the story.
But on purpose, right?
Right.
Yeah. So the next one is Rust Never Sleeps. That's the next episode in the Devilworlds volume.
All right. So this one's got C-3PO and R2-D2 are ambassadors to this planet that's sort of a junkyard,
Yeah.
but also has a bunch of sentient robots on it who are living on it, and they've sort of created their own religion, which is interesting. And I couldn't tell the sort of big priest robot that talks to C-3PO
Yeah.
speaks of this like oneness that all the robots, all the droids who go to the planet become, because they all sort of like rust and corrode into one giant superstructure.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't really tell if it was just a shell of metal sort of melted and corroded together, or if it was like actually turning into a giant robot. In any case, we don't get to see that at any point necessarily.
Yeah, it sort of leaves it doesn't conclusively answer any of those questions, but again, on purpose.
Yeah.
It seems.
And that it really seems like what he's trying to go for is that the droids have created a religion that's very much like the religion that people create, and that it's got like this metaphorical god that sort of may or may not exist, and it has this sort of physical correlate, and he talks about an afterlife that they believe in, which is a strange thing for a droid to believe in.
Yeah.
And so anyway, the Empire comes to the planet because they need scrap metal for their war effort.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that C-3PO is like warning them. They're like, you have to join the Rebel Alliance. You got to defend yourself. And the robot religious people are not about that. They're sort of pacifists. They don't want to fight anybody.
Yeah. Well, they've lived there unencumbered for probably centuries, maybe millennia by now. And the reason is because there's a lot of utility to this world, basically as a junkyard, right? So I'm guessing both the rebels and the Empire used it as a junkyard. So it was sort of like there's no reason to destroy it, right? Because it's useful for the most part. But now the Empire realizes that there's all this scrap metal they can recycle and use in the war effort. So they send a Star Destroyer down there to basically start mining through and separate. I can't remember what material they were talking about, but there was a specific metal alloy that they wanted to get. And then so they sort of send like a landing party and find this droid, who also, by the way, is like a giant. I don't know, maybe it's 30, 40 feet tall or something like that.
He's a big boy.
Yeah.
He's like the head robo priest.
Yeah, this priest robot. And the robot, like, sort of refuses to give in to their demands and says, like, he's not going to fight them. Anyways, they end up destroying him.
And I thought the panel where he's destroyed is also interesting because it's clear that the blasters are turning him into like molten scrap.
Yeah.
But then in that panel, if you didn't know it was a robot, you would think that all the molten metal was gore. Like it's bright red. It looks like it was something very gory.
Yeah.
But it's obviously not, because we know that's a robot. And I wonder if that was like an intentional decision to make him seem more human and get like, or just sort of put a cherry on that point that like this is a being with rights and thoughts, and
it's like a sentient, and
he believes in an afterlife and that kind of thing.
Yeah. And this is also interesting because there's almost this iRobot element to it, where it's like talking about when is something sentient and have like consciousness and deserve to have rights and all that. This actually kind of addresses some of those questions, which is kind of surprising because most of the Marvel Star Wars comic books were just very shallow for the most part and didn't really dive into more deeper philosophical questions like this one seems to do. But that's Alan Moore for you as well. So.
Yeah, for sure. He definitely... I read a bunch of the early Star Wars Marvel comics, and these 5 short Alan Moore stories definitely had like a lot more depth than the vast majority of those did.
Yep.
Although we did get like people in stormtrooper armor riding on pterodactyl creatures, and that was pretty cool. You don't see that anywhere else in Star Wars, as far as I know.
Yeah.
So then after that, we get the Pandora effect. So I believe this is another Alan Moore one.
This one I wasn't so sure, but yeah, it might be.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
So the rebels, the Falcon, are running away from somebody into an area of space called the Hell Hoop. And then they find this big UFO type thing. It's some kind of strange triangular trapezoid.
Yeah.
You get some shades of non-Euclidean geometry, which is a thing that H.P. Lovecraft loved. And also in a lot of who wrote the Marvel run. Like
yeah, someone in the chat just asked who wrote the
Yeah.
Marvel run. Well, lots of different
dozens,
authors. Yeah.
dozens of authors.
Marvel had the Star Wars brand for a few years, anyways. In the
for like
70s.
20 from the 70s until the 90s.
Oh, was it that
Yeah.
long? Okay, before Dark Horse got it.
Yeah, Tales of the Jedi was the first Dark Horse publication.
And in my opinion, I was never that interested in any of the Marvel comic stories. Like, to me, the best ones are all the Dark Horse ones. But maybe there were some good ones. Definitely some interesting ones with Alan Moore's run in the Marvel Star Wars. Anyways, continue.
Yeah, so they find this weird spaceship.
Yeah.
Yes, Marvel was before Dark Horse. So they find this weird spaceship in a region of space called the Hell Hoop, which is inside of an asteroid belt. And in the sort of myth of local space, this is kind of like the place where no sailors want to take their boat because they all go down because there's a kraken or something. All people know is that spacers go missing in this region of space. So this triangular thing appears, and then the people, it's not clear to me where the Falcon ends up, but the crew of the Falcon, Han, Leia, and Chewie, then find themselves in like this opulent palace where they meet these sort of like middle-aged, sort of opulent type, hedonist people who have magic wands.
So I want to say, first of all, in the last couple of years, I've watched all of the original Star Trek series. And there's definitely an episode of Star Trek that is very similar to this, where like very aristocratic, well-to-do, powerful aliens who are able to like materialize people out of space onto their planet. Bring the crew of the Star Trek onto the planet, and start toying with them, if you will. And this is like very similar. And I will. This was probably my least favorite of all these episodes that we read, because it felt so Star Trek-y. It did not feel like a Star Wars story. Like, it kind of, I don't know. It just. It kind of got too much into that like science fiction from the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and
it's like even
not like the space fantasy epic that Star Wars kind of sort of is.
Even the setting of this looks very much like it's something staged on a Paramount backlot in 1960.
I know.
It's like this was left over from filming Caligula or something.
Yeah. It was very odd.
And the technology we see is like these weird magic wands that do whatever. So it's just kind of whatever.
But these beings are like, and again, Star Trek was almost bad for this, because there was a lot of episodes of the original Star Trek of just like all powerful beings.
Just using like Deus Ex Machina aliens, essentially.
Yeah, like probably 5 or 6 times in each season, there's like these all-powerful beings that can just do anything, right? They can just think something and make it happen. And these aliens were very much similar to that with their wands,
Yes. And so these aristocrats, they were sort of keeping this all-powerful being imprisoned somehow and like siphoning its power or something.
Yeah.
It's all a little bit hand-wavy and unclear. It was sort of an interesting allusion to Alan Moore's occult chops, in that there was 5 of them, and so of course 5 is a prime number.
Symbolism.
There's 5 points on a pentagram, etc.
I do wonder if maybe I missed the point of this one too, because I just got too caught up in how Trekky it was. I couldn't get over it when I was reading it. I was like, this is just silly. This doesn't belong in Star Wars, but.
I don't think you did.
Okay.
It wasn't even really clear to me what exactly the heroes, the protagonists, did to escape.
Yeah.
But somehow they let the godlike being, who's sort of a formless cloud of blue plasma or something.
Right.
He escaped and then killed the 5 evil wizard people, and then let them go, and the end. So yeah, it wasn't a super great story.
No.
But then I think it finishes off not necessarily. Well, there's one more actually. What's that last one? Which we'll just go over briefly.
Telotny throws a shape.
I think we skipped one. Oh well, it wasn't memorable. So we'll talk about Telotny throws a shape. So this is
also an odd one.
This is very odd. Like it's not a super great story, but I'm really sort of interested in some of the premises and what it could mean for the Star Wars universe as a whole.
Yeah. But also a little Trekky feeling.
A little bit Trekky.
Yeah.
So Telotny throws a shape. Telotny is one of like 3 or 4 of these weird primordial entities that
like almost godlike entities.
Exactly. And
again.
And they sort of exist outside of time and space, it seems, or they have a very different relationship to time than we do.
Yeah.
Because Leia's like running away from some stormtroopers or something.
Yeah.
And then she comes across like a stormtrooper's skeleton.
Yeah.
And then she finds out that that's like actually the stormtrooper that was chasing her because she wandered into some sort of time warp that Telotny created.
Yeah, so she like sees the stormtrooper skeleton and is like really confused because it looks like it's been there for thousands of years. And she's like, stormtroopers haven't been around that long. Like this makes no sense, right? But then as the story sort of progresses, you see that this being Telotny and there's a couple other beings with really odd names.
Yeah, there's Horless, and Cold Danda Sign.
Yeah.
I think there's one more. I can't remember its name.
Yeah.
But they're all sort of very odd. Telotny's like this sort of like a woman dressed in a green dress with maybe her hair is a different shade of green fire. And then there are some panels where it almost looks like what they're going for is a primitive computer readout of like digital data. She almost looks like pixelated or something.
Yeah.
Which is a really odd aesthetic choice.
Yeah. Anyways, sort of long story short is Telotny like sees Leia and thinks she's like fascinating or beautiful or something, and
doesn't she think that she created Leia? And that's what she means by, because she says like I threw a shape, which is
right,
which is like automatically such a strange thing, like
really odd language. But then she sees like the stormtroopers chasing Leia, and then so she like does a bunch of weird things to the stormtroopers, and then ends up sending them back in time like 8,000 years or something prior to the events of this book. And then the stormtroopers all of a sudden realize they're in the same place, but all the star constellations are different. And one of the stormtroopers is a navigator and is like, with the position of those stars, we must be 8,000 years in the past. Oh no. And then that's kind of, it was actually like a better story than the previous one that we talked about. But again, still like, this doesn't feel like Star Wars at all. Like, I don't think there would be any beings like this in Star Wars. I don't see them as real Star Wars characters, you know?
Well, you do have the ones who are similar.
I guess so. Are they though?
They're shapeshifters, right? And they're sort of all powerful and sort of are at least 1,000,000 years old.
Yeah.
And
I guess these could have been the ones, maybe.
These weren't the ones, because the ones were very clearly celestials and living in a very specific place at this time. They were on the world of Mortis.
Okay.
But anyway, I was the weird, interesting language and character designs sort of made up for a sort of weak story. So I was like, this is cool. I'm glad I read it.
I didn't think the story was actually that weak, though.
I didn't like... It didn't make sense to me what exactly Leia was doing, why she was dressed in her Imperial Senate robes.
It's such a short, was it 5 or 6 pages or something, right? You can't tell much of a story there. But
the only reason you know, as you say, you only know it's Star Wars because there's Princess Leia and stormtroopers.
Yeah, that's literally the only thing that I said. But yeah, you could just make a sci-fi and take those characters out and tell the exact same story and you wouldn't miss a beat. But that's why it doesn't really work as a Star Wars story to me. But again, when this was written pretty early on in the Star Wars universe, so there's probably still like a lot of experimentation with Star Wars storytelling outside of the movies. And obviously Alan Moore is going to be, he's going to push the edges on a lot of things. So overall, there's a few good ones, a couple that I didn't really care for, but
I agree.
Yeah.
Splendid App was another name of one of the deities.
Oh, yeah.
Splendid App.
Yeah.
I would really love to know what.
Yeah, what is inspiration?
I remember
for
coming
those
across
names?
these as I was researching other episodes, and
yeah.
I couldn't find any real information on where these names came from.
Yeah.
I would love to know what bizarre process Alan Moore used to come up with them. Splendid App is like
It's almost like he just put names in a hat and
Almost.
like, yeah, to pick them at random.
Splendid App is the essence of time. Oh no, never mind. I don't know what Splendid App is, but he's like a bunch of cones, giant pink cones with like frowny faces.
Oh, yeah.
And they all speak synchronized, but in the comic book bubbles, it's this very idiosyncratic text that it looks similar to the Sith language. I'm not sure if it is. It would be interesting if I brought up. Some of this is legit canon and some of it's not.
I would say most of it's not canon.
The Millennium Falcon story we told, that's
Yeah.
not canon. But this one in particular, Talatni Throws a Shape, is canon.
Really?
Yeah.
What?
Yes.
Who decided that? Who decided that?
I think
that's
it was used for material for the role playing games, and so it got written into the role playing.
I don't
games.
agree with that.
I don't agree with it. Well, it's there.
I know, but that's so. Oh,
I'm for it.
it may as well have been Captain Kirk and Uhura, who were characters in this.
No, Star Trek was never this
Or
creative
Captain
with
Kirk
their
and
alien
the
designs.
Klingons.
These had more than just a ridge on their forehead or pointy ears. Anyway, that's about all I have for Alan Moore.
Did you know that? Sorry, just as an aside, before we wrap this up,
I got two more things before we wrap up, but go ahead.
Did you know Alan Dean Foster wrote the screenplay for Star Trek: The Motion Picture?
I think I do remember, but yeah,
Oh, really?
I think I remember.
That guy's
across
written
that.
for
but
so
yeah,
many
he's
things.
he's written everything.
Yeah.
It's kind of like J.J. Abrams doing both Star Trek and
exactly.
Star Wars.
Yeah, it's true.
So, if you read these comics, as we've said, especially with Talatni Throws a Shape, Alan Moore's writing can be a little bit self-indulgent, and I think that's in nowhere better exemplified than in Jerusalem. It's a very cool cover to this book. If you're up on your occult symbolism, it's very fun to look at. There's a lot to unpack.
It is a very cool cover.
But just in terms of the indulgence, so this is why I haven't finished reading this book yet, because it's written like this in this section. Crinkled sheet, Daris alieter, loffe upperbit, inscribed asun, illuminated, capital, evermore mista, flyingly she precognizes dim assure unwork, the gentle patient, let errands dote her, dado, head ink urged here to awake Bekwan. And it goes on for that, like for 200 pages.
Really?
I think he's writing in some sort of like weird Scottish dialect or something.
Well, are you familiar with like okay, so just a little plug here. That's a great podcast called The History of English podcast.
Okay.
And
It does sound, it could be like old English.
yeah, there's like 3 ages of English.
Right.
And the thing is, even the second age is pretty much you cannot, it seems like a completely different version of English. It's almost unintelligible to us. There might be some words here and there, but yeah, English is such a weird language, right? But
I think he's like transcribing a really heavy Northampton accent.
maybe
And that's
But
like
it
how it would look phonetically.
when you're reading that, it almost sounded like that old English, from 1,000 years ago or 1,200 years ago.
So that whole Jerusalem trilogy is just basically Alan Moore flexing his literary muscles.
Yeah.
He's just like, I've pretty much done everything I could possibly do. I've I'm sure he's got lots of FU money.
Yeah.
No publisher is telling him he can't do something because they know he can wipe his butt and publish it basically and make $1 million. So, all right, that's all I got. You have anything else?
No, on that note, I think we'll rev up these engines and enter into our hyperspace route.
That's right.
It's locked in and ready to go.
Punch it in. We'll see you.
Thanks for flying with us. We are interested to hear from you. You can reach us at starlorspodcast@gmail.com. Let us know your thoughts, comments, or corrections. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star rating, review, and subscribe. You can also help us out through our Patreon at the Star Lords Podcast. Find us on Instagram, the Star Lords Podcast, on Facebook at the Star Lords Podcast, on Twitter at the Star Lords Podcast, and on YouTube, Star Lords Podcast. We'll catch you next time.